Hey guys, in this week's art lesson, I'm going to teach you how to make a collagraph. A who to what? A collagraph. A collagraph is basically like creating your own stamp using different materials. We're going to be using cardboard and glue. Today, boys and girls, we are going to be focusing on the elements of art, shape, and texture to create our collagraph. As you can see here, I've used lots of different shapes to create my scene. And I've also layered them in a way so that they have texture, or I can feel the bumpiness of the different shapes as they're layered together. I've done this in such a way so that I can create copies, as you can see here, from my collagraph. In this case, we want to make sure that we can feel a little bit of that texture so that we can see it when we do our copies or our rubbings. The cool thing about a collagraph is that you can make multiple copies of your artwork. Let me show you how. Boys and girls, you might recognize some of these lines that you see here. We use lines all the time in the art room. And as you know, when lines connect, they form shapes. And since we're focusing on shapes today, let's talk about the different shapes we can use. Organic shapes that we find in nature, free-form shapes that are ever-changing, and of course, geometric shapes as well. A lot of artists use shapes within their artwork, and we're going to take a look at a couple of them right now. Artist Henri Matisse. Many grade levels have learned about him this year. He uses a lot of organic and free-form shapes within his artwork. Paul Klee is another artist who also uses shapes within his artwork. You'll notice a lot of geometric shapes in his. And of course, Pablo Picasso is very well known for his cubist art, where he uses a lot of shapes as well. Did you recognize any of these shapes in the artwork we just looked at? Let's create a collagraph. Boys and girls, you're going to need some crayons without paper, scissors, a glue stick, and some cardboard. To get started, you're going to need some thin cardboard, like a mac and cheese box or a cereal box or something like that. You can go ahead and open up the box and then use your scissors to cut it so you get a nice flat piece to work with. Once you get it opened up, decide how big you want your base to be and go ahead and trim the sides so you have a nice flat piece to work with. Once you've got your base all set, take your scrap cardboard and use that to cut different shapes out of to create your design for your collagraph. You could draw the shapes before you cut them, or you could just sort of feel your way through the cardboard with your scissors. You could even use some objects to trace if you were looking for a specific shape. Remember that your shape design can be anything that you like. It can be more abstract, like with what I'm making now, with just some different random shapes and arranging them in a way that I think looks good. You could do something that's more specific. For example, cutting out shapes that could make the shape of a flower. Maybe cutting out a zigzag line to create some grass. It can be anything that you'd like. You could even do a sun, like what you see here, with some rays coming out. It's really up to you. Then you want to get a glue stick and carefully glue all your pieces in place. Make sure they're on there really, really good. And boys and girls, don't forget to make sure that you give your project a good massage. Make sure that pieces are glued on really well before you move on to the next step. All right, now you're going to want to use a piece of paper. I'm just using some copy paper and some crayons with no paper. Now, if you want a really easy way to get the paper off your crayons, I've included a little tip for you guys on the Padlet page so you don't have to sit there and peel them. You might already have some sitting around. Any crayons will do. All right, you're going to want to slide your artwork underneath 1/2 of your paper if you made it small like mine. You might have a much bigger one, and in that case, you could center it. I'm going to do a rubbing now on top. And I'm going to push and pull with my crayon on the side to reveal my image. You can use any color that you would like as you go through this process. And now you can see I've made a copy with my collagraph. Now on the other side, if you have room, you can position your artwork underneath and use maybe a different color. And go ahead and repeat that same process. Now afterwards, you can go in and add all kinds of color. You could play around with complementary colors, which are the colors that are across the color wheel from each other. You could add more shapes in the background. You could define your shapes by maybe outlining some of them with a darker color. Or maybe you want to fill in your background. What about adding some lines or pattern or design? How else can you make your prints? How many prints can you make, and how many different ways can you add color to them? Here are some examples of mine. One of my most favorite artists, Andy Warhol, also works with multiples. He uses a different form of printmaking. Do you see how many different times he copies his art, but experiments with different combinations of color? Maybe you could try combining colors like he did. Maybe you want to create multiple collagraphs so you can express yourself in a variety of ways. All right, boys and girls, let's recap. You will cut a variety of shapes from thin cardboard and arrange them in a way that you like. Remember that you are the artist and you can create as many of these collagraphs as you like. Think about the shapes that you're cutting out and how you want to create your scene. Glue your pieces down and once dry, place under a sheet of paper and use a crayon that has no paper to rub on top of the paper. Remember to use your crayon on its side. Do at least 2 copies and then add color to make each one different. Don't forget to post your masterpieces. Now, if you're looking to take this collagraph project further, stay tuned for more. Now, you could start the same way, but this time maybe flip your collagraph so it's facing the other direction if they're going to be side by side. Maybe this time add just some crayon detail, like some lines, maybe just some spots of color, maybe some different visual texture. This time you could add watercolor. You could add a lot of watercolor or just a little bit of watercolor. Remember, boys and girls, just like in art class, you want to add a little puddle into your color and keep your brush nice and wet. And don't forget to rinse your brush between colors. Another fun way to print is to use paint. You can use one color and stay on only the shapes, or you can try multiple colors across the entire collagraph. Remember that you want to work kind of quick so that paint doesn't dry before it's time to stamp it. You could even try adding more color once it's all dry, or defining your shapes with a marker once it's dry. The possibilities are truly endless. Remember once you flip it to print to give it a really good rub. Last thing you can try is to color the actual cardboard. Using crayon, oil pastel, marker, you could even try painting it. So have fun and get creative. And don't forget to post to our Padlet page. I cannot wait to see what you do with this collagraph lesson. Bye guys!